Last January, the United Nations International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea ruled that Britain has no sovereignty over the Chagos Islands. The Mauritius Prime Minister has slammed Britain for refusing to return control of these islands to his country.
The UK continues to ignore the International Court of Justice as well as its obligations under international law by maintaining its unlawful occupation of the Chagos archipelago.
Hello and a warm welcome to this week's edition of Africa Today, which is focusing on Britain's dismissal of a United Nations court decision that demanded it stops colonizing the Chagos Islands in the Indian Ocean. We are asking, what's the reason behind Britain's arrogance and refusal to vacate Chagos Islands? In the second segment of our program, we are analyzing the upsurge in attacks and kidnappings by the Boko Haram terrorist group in Nigeria. We are asking, why has the Nigerian government failed to defeat this terror group? Join us for an incisive analysis on these two issues with our experts. And don't forget to send your comments as you watch our show today.
Why is Britain colonizing Chagos? In January this year, the United Nations International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea ruled that the United Kingdom has no sovereignty over the Chagos Islands. These strategically located Indian Ocean islands also include Diego Garcia, home to a major U.S. military base. The UN body's judgment follows a ruling by the International Court of Justice in February 2019 that the UK must end its occupation of Chagos. Delivering his judgment, the then president of the International Court of Justice, Abdullahi Ahmed Yusuf, was categorical that the United Kingdom must vacate the Chagos archipelago.
That the United Kingdom has an obligation to bring to an end its administration of the Chagos archipelago as rapidly as possible, and that all member states must cooperate with the United Nations to complete the decolonization of Mauritius.
The 73rd session of UN General Assembly in May 2019 also overwhelmingly supported the ruling by the ICJ on Chagos archipelago and the complete decolonization of Mauritius.
On draft resolution A/73/L84 revision 1 entitled Advisory Opinion of the International Court of Justice on the legal consequences of the separation of the Chagos archipelago from Mauritius in 1965. Will all delegations confirm that the votes are accurately reflected on the screen?
The United Kingdom has arrogantly rejected decisions by all the three international bodies. Despite London's belligerence, the people of Chagos are unrelenting in their quest for justice.
Now, in this regard, charges have been filed in the International Criminal Court against the British military representative at Diego Garcia over allegations of apartheid against Chagosians. Jonathan Levy, the lawyer for those forcibly removed from the archipelago, has demanded that the culprits be arrested and brought to trial in The Hague. Now, to discuss more on Britain's continued colonization of Chagos, we have contacted Dr. Levy, who is also a professor of international law at Norwich University. Thanks a lot for your time, Dr. Levy.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Dr. Levy, now representing the indigenous Chagosians, you have filed a lawsuit against the US and the UK in the International Criminal Court. Now, please briefly elaborate about that case.
Yes, I'm representing the Chagosian people in both damage claims and an action before the International Criminal Court, where we're asking the International Criminal Court to investigate apartheid against the Chagosian Islanders by Great Britain. And the reason for that is the Chagosians were unlawfully and forcefully deported from their homeland by Great Britain, and laws put into effect that stripped them of their citizenship, of their property rights, and any right to return to the Chagos Islands. No other subject people have been treated that way by Great Britain, and we feel it's solely because these are an African people, and there's racist motives that have been reflected in the actions of Great Britain all along.
Now, thanks a lot for that, Dr. Levy, and stay tuned for more.
Britain, with its trademark imperial arrogance, once again dismissed a United Nations court decision that it has no entitlement to the Chagos Islands. A spokesperson for the British Foreign Office said Mauritius has never held sovereignty over the Chagos, and the UK does not recognize its claim.
Britain has arrogantly rejected the ruling by the UN tribunal that basically demands that it ends the colonization of Chagos Islands. Now, what's your take on this rejection?
Yes, Britain is rejecting the rule of international law. Britain is rejecting the findings of the UN General Assembly, the African Union, and of two UN courts, the International Court of Justice and the International Tribunal of the Law of the Sea. So we have Britain acting in this fashion solely because of its military relationship with the United States. In essence, Britain is saying it will not respect international law because it has the backing of the United States.
Well, there you have it. Britain is acting with impunity because the US backs its actions. So, Mr. Levy, what happens next after Britain's rejection of the ruling by the UN tribunal, and how will Mauritius continue to pursue its rightful sovereignty over the Chagos Islands?
Overwhelmingly, the UN General Assembly and international organizations have recognized Mauritius as the sovereign over the Chagos Islands. But the United States and United Kingdom have made it clear that any attempts by Mauritius to physically claim its territory will be met by military force and will be repulsed. So the Mauritians cannot enter the territorial waters, for example, of the Chagos Islands, even though that is their territory. Mauritius, therefore, must use other methods since it can't militarily compete with the United States or United Kingdom. For example, Mauritius could and should make a referral to the International Criminal Court regarding the apartheid exclusion of the Chagosians from their homes. Mauritius could also assert sovereignty by assigning commercial and property rights to the Chagos Islands, to the Chagosians and others who might be willing to act privately. And finally, Mauritius and like-minded countries should recognize Argentinian claims to the Falkland Islands in retaliation for this bully behavior by the United Kingdom.
Nearly 2,000 indigenous inhabitants of the colonized Chagos archipelago were forcibly evicted in the early 1970s so that the largest island, Diego Garcia, could be leased to the U.S. to use as an airbase. The people of Chagos have never been allowed to return home. Olivier Bancolt, the leader of the Chagos refugee camp, who now lives in Mauritius, explains here on their struggles.
On a essayé de négocier avec les Anglais, mais ils n'ont rien entendu. Et c'est pour cette raison que depuis 1997, on a entrepris des actions légales contre le gouvernement britannique. Et on a connu la victoire, on a connu les défaites, mais on est aussi jamais découragé parce qu'on sait que notre cause, c'est un cause juste. Ce que nous demandons, c'est notre dignité, c'est notre droit fondamental.
What is the situation of the indigenous inhabitants of Chagos who were forced to vacate their land to give way to a massive U.S. military base in Diego Garcia?
The situation of my clients, the Chagosians, is not a good one and hasn't been for decades. In fact, some of them are still stateless people because of the actions of Great Britain in deporting them. They are badly in need of aid. Great Britain has lied to the United Nations and claimed there was a $50 million support fund to help the Chagosians. That was a lie that was told by the UN ambassador of Great Britain. They were assured these payments would be made, yet, according to the Guardian newspaper in England, only £12,000 of a £40 million fund has ever been paid out, and that money wasn't even given directly to Chagosians. Older Chagosians are dying in despair that they'll ever see their homeland again, and many Chagosians are living in poverty, all the while England is putting a false face to the world that it's benevolent toward the Chagosians, yet the facts speak otherwise.
The recent judgment by the UN Tribunal on Chagos Islands is not just a blow to Britain, but also to the United States and its military adventurism. U.S. warplanes flying from Diego Garcia base have been used to bomb civilians in countries such as Iraq and Afghanistan and threaten adversaries such as China and Iran.
Dr. Levy, you earlier talked about the link between the occupation of Chagos by Britain and the presence of a U.S. military base in Diego Garcia. Now, do you think this secretive airbase is the main reason that Britain continues to illegally occupy the Chagos Island?
Oh, absolutely. That is the main question. The U.S. base was the reason, the only reason for the deportation of the Chagosians. The U.S. military base on Diego Garcia is the reason for the apartheid laws to keep the Chagosians out of the entire Chagos archipelago. The U.S., not Great Britain, is the real master of the Chagos Islands. And for reasons that are not really clear, the U.S. wants all of the Chagos atolls clear of people. Even though there's only a single military base at Diego Garcia, they want a massive section of the Indian Ocean clear of all population. It is true that there's a massive base at Diego Garcia, which houses Naval, Air Force, and U.S. Space Force assets now, but still, they have tried to clear a actual immense section of the Indian Ocean from all scrutiny.
The U.S. has made every effort to draw attention to alleged disregard for international law by its adversaries, while conveniently ignoring that law's application to the U.S. presence on Diego Garcia. Now, what's your take, Mr. Levy?
It must be remembered that the United States is the main opponent of international law in the world. The United States does not recognize the International Criminal Court or the International Court of Justice. The United States has ignored rulings against it on Nicaragua, and former President Trump even put sanctions on the International Criminal Court and its prosecutors. The Biden administration has not removed those sanctions. If the U.S. ever wants to regain respect in international relations, it must honor its international obligations and follow international law. President Biden campaigned for president, claiming he was the greatest anti-apartheid fighter in the history of the United States Congress. Yet here we are with the U.S. supporting English racism in the Chagos Islands. Again and again, the hypocrisy continues.
Now, from our conversation today, it's quite clear that a lot needs to be done to eject Britain from its last colony in Africa. Here at Africa Today, we shall keep you posted on the struggle for the liberation of Chagos. Stay tuned, and we'll be back soon with analysis on the upsurge of Boko Haram attacks in northern Nigeria.
Upsurge in Boko Haram attacks.
The Boko Haram terrorist group has increased its deadly attacks and kidnappings in Nigeria. There is concern that this terrorist group is changing tactics and carrying out more kidnappings for ransom. In February, Boko Haram terrorists kidnapped more than 300 schoolgirls, marking the third mass abduction since December.
The general security situation is taking a turn for the worse amid reports that in the first 6 weeks of 2021, at least 1,525 Nigerians were killed across the country. Women and children are bearing the brunt of insecurity in Nigeria. A woman here mourns the killing of her brother.
For more analysis on the security situation in Nigeria, especially the spike in Boko Haram attacks, we have contacted Dr. Mojuba Olu Okome, a professor of political science at Brooklyn College of City University of New York. Thanks a lot for your time, madam.
My pleasure.
Dr. Okome, can we say that the recent increase in attacks by Boko Haram is a pointer that this Takfiri terrorist group is still strong despite claims by the government that it's technically defeated?
Yes, unfortunately, Boko Haram is still strong because it's able to swoop down at will, abduct people. So the scope of its activities is spreading. It was in the northeast, and now we are having more action in the northwest.
Thanks, Dr. Okome. Now you have said there that Boko Haram attacks are spreading far and wide. Now, why has the Nigerian government failed to defeat this terrorist group despite having one of the strongest armies in Africa?
I think that Nigerian government has to really do serious assessment about its strategies and its what it's done so far to identify why it has been impossible to end this reign of terror by Boko Haram, despite the fact that actually our president had said that technically Boko Haram was defeated. But technicalities are not what we need. We need for Nigerian school children to be safe and secure. We need Nigerian citizens to feel the security that comes from Boko Haram actually being defeated in reality. That hasn't happened, and it is unacceptable.
Indeed, it's unacceptable that innocent Nigerians have suffered for over 10 years as Boko Haram continues to grow stronger. But who's funding or sustaining the activities of Boko Haram? Who are the foreign backers, if any, of Boko Haram terrorists?
One thing that Boko Haram has said clearly is that it owes allegiance to ISIS, and so there are allegations that are thrown around about foreign backers of all sorts, about the porous nature of Nigeria's borders, about the arms and ammunition, very dangerous ones, that have flooded the market after Gaddafi's fall, being cheaply available to groups like Boko Haram, whoever the backers are.
Dr. Okome there mentioned that the ISIS terrorist group is the international affiliate of the Boko Haram. Now, lest we forget, the extremist Wahhabi ideology that is propagated and promoted by Saudi Arabia is the reason for the existence of ISIS or Daesh terrorist group, and indeed other terrorist groups such as Al-Shabaab and Boko Haram that are spreading mayhem and killing innocent people in Africa. Now, how has the spread of Wahhabism contributed to the increase in power of Takfiri terrorist groups such as Boko Haram?
Oh, tremendously. Because there are these values that are held by groups that espouse Wahhabism. They are very convinced that their version of Islam is the only legitimate one. They are wedded to a very draconian interpretation. They're very intolerant. Frankly, they are not accepted by many Muslims as legitimate in their take about what to do in society as Muslims, what to do as Muslims who are obedient to the will of Allah, and how to relate to fellow Muslims and other non-Muslim religious communities and even secular communities.
The Boko Haram insurgency has displaced over 2.5 million people in the Lake Chad Basin. Civilians in Nigeria, Cameroon, Chad, and Niger continue to be affected by grave violations of human rights, widespread sexual and gender-based violence, forced recruitment, and suicide bombings. A Nigerian living in a refugee camp does not see the situation improving soon.
Now I'm in God's hands. If peace is restored one day and I'm told I can go back home, I'll go back to my village immediately. But time goes by and the situation isn't changing, so there's no way I can go home.
How are the Boko Haram attacks impacting on the daily lives of Nigerians?
Wahhabism has strengthened the capacity of groups like Boko Haram to cause devastation and, inflict a lot of brutal pain on people. So in Nigeria, over 2 million people are internally displaced as a result of Boko Haram's rampaging. First of all, at that time, it was over 2 million is when it was active only in the northeast. Now it has extended to the northwest, so the number of internally displaced people is going to rise.
The unrest has become a political problem for President Muhammadu Buhari, who has faced mounting criticism in recent months over high-profile attacks by Boko Haram terrorists and bandits. During his New Year's speech, Buhari admitted that Boko Haram attacks have thwarted his government efforts to eradicate poverty.
In parts of the country where chronic poverty, social exclusion, and disillusionment among sections of the youth were already a problem, the circles of violence that have been unleashed by mindless groups like Boko Haram and others have thwarted the efforts of government to undertake the social policy and associated investments that could make a huge difference in the quality of life of our citizens.
Now, Dr. Akome, as we wind up, can you tell us what will it take to defeat Boko Haram terrorists?
Efforts need to be made to build peace based on psychological, social, economic, and military strategies. Only the military strategy won't work, especially because these are not people who are like an orthodox formal army, They're in communities among people who are afraid of them, who will not probably speak out against them because they are afraid of reprisals. So the normal military strategies are not sufficient to fight this. And, within Islam too, the Muslim leaders need to really do a lot of work to convince people who have bought into this ideology that there are ways of being obedient to Allah, of being a Muslim that totally is diametrically opposed to the Boko Haram perspective.
Now, Dr. Okome there says that a military strategy is not enough to defeat Boko Haram, and that there are cultural, economic, and religious dimensions to the northern Nigeria conflict. Now, do you agree with her or not? Do let us know your opinion through our social media handle appearing on the screen. Well, that's it for this edition of Africa Today. On behalf of the entire Africa Today team, I'd like to thank you all for watching. Take care and goodbye for now.